Welcome to CSPN. CSPN is a self-admittedly trolling name on ESPN, which is, maybe at one time, maybe my memory is not the best from when I was a little kid growing up. It was a lot better back in the day. But it has become a downright terrible broadcast agency. It is largely a worldview analysis on drama amongst athletes, and a terrible one at that. And so Lamar Bratton and I, Zach Gilman, decided to let's throw a sports podcast worthy of listening to. A motto we laughed about it, but it's serious, is a sports podcast that won't be burned to ashes when Christ returns.
Yeah.
Something of value, and that particularly the demographic of kids who listen to sports podcasts, or the age demographic, I think the 90% of them are in like 10 to 35.
Yeah.
That's a very influential time to be really downing a lot of worldview analysis, a lot of often downright religious commentary on people's lives, certainly moral commentary, what that guy should be doing, how this coach should be responding to this, what this owner should be doing. Lots of shoulds, which have a moral implication.
Right.
And a lot of it's honestly trash.
Yeah. What's so interesting is I remember high school and college, like when there was, after the game, we'd watch SportsCenter until I couldn't stay awake.
Yep. Yeah.
So I can imagine how much of that content was discipling me at the time.
Yep.
Especially on my favorite topic of sports.
Yep.
And now, not only do kids have that, it's social media, it's Instagram, it's YouTube, it's almost nonstop.
Yep.
And these commentators are shaping lives for sure.
Yep. It's blown up. It's a funny little story about that. You saying we used to go to bed to it, which is totally true. I remember that. Sleepovers. Just on in the background.
Yeah. You wouldn't talk about anything.
And it's the same thing. So you've watched this like 6 times.
Yeah, the top 10. The top 10 was on there over and over and over again.
But Pastor Sean, as you guys know, has a very disciplined structure to his morning, a very God-honoring structure to his morning. Wakes up early, works hard, works out, reads, prays. Very, very disciplined and with great things. But I was his roommate back in college, and before we were Christian at all. And I vividly remember him every morning waking up and watching SportsCenter. That was his morning ritual.
Yeah.
I mean, that was usually after we crushed a workout.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it goes with that. It's a liturgy of life.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, if you put like ESPN in the category, the medium of like podcasting, which is really what it is. It's one of the most listen to things of someo's life for a lot of people.
Right.
Like that's like the only podcast they listen to.
Who in the sports world, the first thing you're thinking about is ESPN.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I can barely think of a competitor. And when we were looking up podcasts, I was like, is there a Christian podcast? We found a Christian podcast or two that would interview athletes, and that's great. If we can interview athletes, great. We're not that cool, so we just don't know names and people. But
I got a couple.
Okay,
I got a couple. I got a couple people.
I know the guy from the YMCA.
Yeah. I'm not saying like I'm bringing in Jay Jettas and all that, but I got some people that might be recognizable.
No promises. I plan to reach out Machado and Todd. I'll get him in my office.
See what happens.
But there wasn't any podcast that was just taking in the content of this week's sports and analyzing it as Christians, with helpful content and with application of, here's what this really should have happened here.
Right.
Here's how this coach really should have responded.
You think about the Ja Morant situation.
Yep.
And that was like one of the things that sparked our interest to do this is because he objectively did one of the most moronic things you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And so much of the commentary was that Ja Morant is a victim.
Yeah.
And we're like, look, we've got there's got to be a voice out there to shed light, especially for these young kids that are watching sports. What true valor looks like.
Absolutely, and we've seen this over and over. I don't know if they're all going to the same therapist, professional athletes, when they do something wrong. It's like they do something very stupid, immoral, and then what happens is they release some thing on their Twitter that says, that's not me. That's not the real me. It's like, hey, dude, that was you. Like, literally, you did do that, for one. Let's just start with that. Like, we can all be on the same page.
Right.
And two, like, no, you are a sinner. You made a sinful choice.
Right.
Like, we are a culture that's completely abandoned taking responsibility for our actions, for the things that we do, and just saying, no, that is me.
Right.
And, you know, they always want to have it both ways. That's not the real me, but I'm seeking help because I do need help. It's like, no, just combine those two. Yeah. It was you, and yeah, you do need help, and good, you're going to get help.
I heard a quote from Draymond Green. You know,
recent?
Well, I don't know how recent it was, but this was surrounding the drama with him and Jordan Poole.
Okay, yeah.
For those of our listeners that aren't familiar, Jordan Poole was a teammate of Draymond Green's on the Warriors, and they had a conflict where Draymond Green literally punches Jordan Poole in the face and knocks him cold out. Like, it was not like completely cold out. It's on camera. TMZ released the footage and everything.
Yeah.
So Draymond Green, like, after he, you know, goes to everyone's therapist, he said, I had to punch Jordan Poole to know what it's like to be a good teammate.
No.
Or something of that nature. He said, like, I had to punch Jordan Poole in order to learn more about like, he basically said that. Like, I had to punch him.
Yeah.
Like, in order to realize that it's not good to punch your teammates. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing a lot, but the basis of the quote was like, I had to punch him in order to learn.
Yeah, and when you don't have any objective morality, you're enculturated into San Francisco sports in particular, let alone the NBA and just America where it's at, then you just come up, you have an ingrained knowledge that redemption is a good thing, that you're a sinner, and that redemption is a real thing and a good thing. And so that statement is basically saying, like, I'm a better person, I'm redeemed now. But it's like, where do you even get up the concept of redemption if you're going to throw everything out the window of, like, what's reality?
Right.
And what's moral? But you can't have both those. So it was an immoral thing, Draymond Green, to punch your teammate in the face. And then you just say, like, I made a huge mistake. I've learned from my mistake. But that rhetoric, you know, and I know you're paraphrasing, so, you know, if we're wrong in the paraphrase, but that rhetoric's common in sports. Right. Of, like, I had to do this. I had to have that affair. I had to lose all my money at the casino. It's like, no, you actually didn't need to do that. So, like, sure, like, yes is good that you learn from it.
Yeah, right.
We're yes and admitting that.
Yeah, I had to cut off my right arm to really know how bad I'm gonna miss it.
Yeah. But they make it sound like, and these are the idols of kids.
Yeah, right.
So
then,
So then they grow up and they're like, do you know how many kids in middle and high school this past year, since Draymond said that quote, punched their teammate in the face and said, "Coach, it was just what I had to do."
Oh, the kid that idolizes Draymond Green, dude,
he's gonna win some championships.
Like, Dre, out of all the people, like, even people that don't know it, like, they hate Draymond Green. But, like, the kid that idolizes Draymond, like, he wants to be a villain. Like, he's not looking for true glory. He's like, I want to antagonize everyone I see.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I love that you said that, because even the desire to be a villain, insofar as a villain necessarily has attached to it the bad guy.
Yeah, right.
And by bad, I'm talking a real immoral man.
Yeah.
Making actually evil decisions. So
right.
He's not just a bad guy insofar as, like, Jesus would be perceived as a bad guy to the Pharisees.
Yeah.
That kind of bad guy is good, because he's a bad guy to the right people.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, they do aspire to be a villain.
Yeah.
And in sports, you know, we see that. They aspire to sleep around. They aspire to utilize their bonuses in the stupidest ways.
Right.
And they don't leave any kind of legacy of righteousness and positive influence for kids, besides when they're paid to go to the local hospital for half a day and take pictures and hand out, you know, some toys or something.
Right.
And sure, that's a good thing. I'm just saying, for a lot of them, like, that's the extent of whatever they're doing, to be positive with their influence, and to be helpful to the youth that by the thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions have their jersey with their name on their back and are trying to be just like them.
Right.
And extends far beyond the court or the field or what have you.
Yeah, no, seriously. And one of the things that made me think about, that I love about when you mentioned Jesus was a bad guy to the right people.
Yep.
One guy's games that I really admire is Trae Young.
Yeah.
And he, Ice Trae, he's right, the antagonizer of them all. Like, especially when you see Trae Young go to Madison Square Garden, that's the right kind of villain.
Yeah.
Like, he is the away team, cold-blooded, three-pointer to win the game, to ice the game, and antagonize the crowd. See, that's what I think about when you say bad guy to the right people.
Yeah.
Like, it's on the court.
I had to punch my teammate. I had to sleep with his wife because I had to learn. You're like, no, dude, that's a wicked decision.
Right.
Don't make that decision.
Right.
And don't influence kids to make that decision.
Yeah.
But yet, on the court, in the confines of the sport, right, when be a villain to this aroma of everyone wants you to fail.
You're trying to defeat the other team.
Square Garden.
You automatically are a protagonist to their story.
So get after that.
Right.
Get after that all day.
Yeah.
And that's good to have that confidence, to have that work ethic, because it's going to require, you're going to have the pressure on you to pull it off, the perseverance. There's a lot of character traits, and this is part of why we want to do a sports podcast, is because sports have a lot of transcendent value to them. The Apostle Paul references sports. Physical training is of some value, but I'm referencing it more so to say sports have always been a thing, always will be a thing.
Yeah.
Adam and Eve, I don't know what games they played, but there was a winner and there was a loser. And if it was before the fall, then they just didn't sin, but there was still a winner, there was still a loser. Not everyone gets a trophy in a competitive thing, and that's the way God designed the world. It's a beautiful way in which God designed the world. It inspires good camaraderie as well as great work ethic.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons we want to talk about sports is just because there is a lot of value there. They've always been around. They're always going to be around. Economically, it's an unfathomably large industry.
Right.
And I think that reveals more of an idolatry of sports, a legitimate worshiping of certain athletes, of certain enterprises, of certain ways of life that are false narratives.
And that's so good. Before we get to the idolatry piece, because has to be hit on. Has to be hit on. Obviously, we're doing this podcast because we're passionate about sports, and sports has been a passion of ours for a long time.
Yeah.
But there's definitely been a little bit of a redemptive arc for both of us in that area. So
absolutely.
Tell our listeners a little bit about what that was like for you, like your first passion for sports, and how that actually changed into something that actually acknowledges God's glory in sports.
Yeah. No, for me, I mean, as early as I can remember, I remember having a competitive heart about things. While always, I can really say this, always at least recognizing, not able to perform accordingly, but recognizing the virtue of humility, of sportsmanlike conduct, of respect, of winning well and losing well. I mean, from my earliest days, I can remember, the time when I would lose, to be like, there's a right way to do this.
Yeah.
I could feel it. I'm like, just as a little kid.
Right.
Again, not always performing to that, to that bar. But I remember that. I love sports. I grew up in a family that didn't really care for sports, actually, so I was the youngest. They always were supportive, though, in my sports, and that just leads to a lot of community that becomes your people, even your church to a degree. And I'm using that word ecclesia or congregated pretty broadly here, but it often does. It became my church, and you even see it amongst Christian kids who don't go to church ever to worship God with God's people, but they're at a soccer tournament again.
Yeah.
But I wasn't even raised really going to church, or at least very moderately, and maybe we'll talk about that more in the future, until I was about 8 or 9, and then from there, I didn't really go that much, and in a small town upstate New York. But I say all that because sports, my family split up. Sports haven't played a big role in just being a means of grace to me, to teach me hard work, teach me, how to persevere, teach me how to deal with injuries, which are just going to happen in life, teach me how to deal with different relationships. Hey, teammates that are really easy to deal with, really hard to deal with, how to make people better. And then coaches played a big influence, pretty much all, I can say, by God's grace and kindness to me, positively. None of them were Christian. I don't never had a coach that was like, we're going to pray, or we're going to even, none of them were even verbally Christian, none of them attended church. Yeah. But just, that's the nature of God's grace to us in sports. They have so many transcendent, godly virtues that come out of any sport taken seriously.
Right.
So they played such a big role for me that, and the last thing I'll say before I throw it to you is that when I had injuries, my idolatry of sports, because I would say I idolized it for sure. I've replaced the worship of God wholeheartedly with sports.
Yeah.
I saw those idols begin to crumble. And I thought, man, if you put your hope in this, dude, this is like, if you, a lot of people know me, I've torn both my Achilles tendons fully. I've broken my tibia, my fibula. There's a long list of injuries that God used to humble me. And a lot of those came through sports, or they impacted sports I loved. Missed seasons that were like everything to me. Yeah. And that's just such a good, humbling gift of God that I look back on now. When I was in the thick of it, I'm like, this is the worst thing that could have happened to me.
Right.
But God used it mightily to bring redemption in my life.
It's like one of those tangible ways where God's restraining grace on people who are not Christians.
Yeah.
Like if God really just let us, just cut us loose to everything we absolutely desired and wanted to do, especially at that age, not Christian parents, you're not going to church, you're obviously not reading scripture.
Yeah.
You just had these systems in place that in order to be successful in those things, you have to put on attributes that are godly. And that affected you.
Yeah, you had to. Yeah. Yeah, and when you idolize something, sports are something that have a unique ability to keep you motivated to actually do virtuous things, even though an idol like sports, it can't really pay out.
Yeah,
it can never pay out what an idol in worship is meant to pay out, or like what we're hoping it'll pay out. But nonetheless, it's a sin, right? Not all sins are equal, but particularly, not all sins are equal in how destructive they are.
Yeah.
And sports, I would say, is a sin that if you idolize sports, there's going to be a lot of common grace in that being the idol of choice.
Yeah.
Still idolatry.
Yeah.
It's worthy of hell. It's going to be very problematic in your life. It can cause significant problems, and we'll talk about those stories as they come up in our podcast amongst athletes and things like that. Horror stories, tragedies. Yeah. But on the flip side, you can find a lot of athletes who are not Christian, who actually do maintain their marriages. They have kids. They talk about just a lot of virtuous things.
Yeah, perseverance.
Yeah,
loyalty.
Yep.
Fortitude.
Yep.
Temperance that it takes to when you're under pressure, like how much self-control it takes when you have not only your personal adrenaline, but you have the adrenaline of the whole crowd.
Yeah.
Pumping into the atmosphere that like either you're gonna disappoint literally millions of people.
Yeah.
Or uplift them. Like that's how much self-control it takes.
Yeah.
So I see that.
Yeah, been there, disappoint millions of people. Let's hear about your sports history a bit.
Like you, I remember being competitive at an early age. Mm-hmm. The thing that it has to do with it's definitely my parents.
Yeah.
Although, like, for some reason, something happened with you, like, where your parents were into sports. Like, my parents have always been about sports. And now that we do little board games and whatnot, like, they say that I am the competitive one. But if you see my mom win anything, she's a glow. Like, she'll let you know.
Yeah.
My dad likes to, like...
She's texting you right now about Christmas Day.
Right, yeah. It's like absolutely.
Scrabble.
Yeah. We did a pick'em league. You didn't know this, but... She was in first place all 17 weeks.
Oh, really?
Lost on week 18, came in second place. So she missed the big prize money by like a couple of picks. And she's been texting me almost every day about like how the rules are not in her favor.
Always the rules problem.
Yeah. But anyways, my parents are competitive. My dad absolutely never let me win. I remember over and over again.
Him. That's good.
Yeah. I remember over and over again my sister coming in from playing basketball with him outside crying because like she tried so hard, couldn't beat him. I remember finally beating him.
Even on the sister, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, he was ruthless.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to play him and you beat him, it's because you actually beat him.
Yeah.
So that'll be a generational thing for sure.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. So I remember early age being competitive, playing basketball, uh, playing some flag football early on, but what I remember most about sports is a lot of the same. Is just those lessons. My dad, I was fortunate enough to have my dad as my coach. My dad is a pastor, so he did instill biblical values intentionally into us, not just for the win-loss columns, but because he wanted to glorify God. And so I was blessed by that. However, I wouldn't say that until probably my adult years when I actually was a regenerate Christian and started truly committing myself to walking with the Lord on a day-to-day basis. So sports was really one. It was pleasing to win, and I knew not to be a sore loser. But it was also just conforming to my environment. It was unacceptable to my parents, and it being unacceptable to my parents for that long, it was just ingrained into me to not be a sore loser. My parents my mom might disagree that I'm a sore loser, but anyhow, college, same thing. Although I played Division I football, it was with a school that, I mean, we were not super successful. We had really good players, but couldn't put it together as a team. But even throughout college, like there's still a shaping in you that happens, even though after practice and after games, like we would go out and we would party and we would do debaucherous things. We knew that it took certain virtues, a minimum amount of virtues, to be successful. And it was so interesting how every time you step up a level, talent and skill without those virtues only can get you so far. Now, there's guys that are in professional leagues making a lot of money that are lacking virtue and are still accomplishing great things, but I mean, there's still some portions of virtue. It might even just, like, the only virtue they have is fortitude. Because they know how to keep grinding no matter what. But at the end of the day, they lack self-control over here. At the end of the day, they're unjust. At the end of the day, they're missing all these other things. And so even for the best of the best, when lacking some virtues, it still takes something, something in order to have that same success.
Yeah, absolutely. And those guys, it always catches up with them eventually.
Yeah, true.
I mean, the nightmare stories of the guy who, whatever, made tens of millions of dollars and now is bankrupt, owns how many lenders, and
God will not be mocked, right?
Yeah, whatever to which one sows, one will reap. And that is, sports is a place where you see that farming system, that principle of God, play out over and over and over. You can't sow laziness, slothfulness, lack of fortitude into it without reaping loss.
Right, yeah.
And you'll eventually get weeded out of the God-blessed capitalistic nature of sports, which are that the better ones keep going, and the ones that aren't that good lose their business.
Yeah, and all the stories that we're going to be covering throughout this podcast are just going to prove exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, a little bit about, to give you guys an idea, and hey, when you're listening to the first podcast of something, you're in a good place to give some input. So we're open to input. But our aim is, I'll give you a little bit of breakdown of what we plan to do every podcast. Again, our goal is to do it once a month. I think that's a good goal we'll hit. Lord willing, if it grows listenership, you guys really appreciate it. We could probably do it more often, especially as we get better at this whole thing. But I'll give you a brief breakdown. We're going to try and keep it about 40-minute podcasts, and we will do some commentary to start on just sports of that month. Different championships, different games, scores, and probably just do that for 5-10 minutes that you are actually, if you're a guy who doesn't want to go on ESPN every day and doesn't care, which is a good thing, to go on ESPN every day, but you're like, I still like to hear updates and scores and whatnot. you're going to get that here. We plan to kind of give you a bird's eye view of, hey, here's all the sports going on. Here's what's going on. Here's who's winning. Here's who's not winning. And then from there, we're going to spend probably, I'd say about half that time just honing in on some drama. There's always drama. And the reality is that's where so much of the loves of heart come out, and the analysis of what the heart should love, how we should respond to certain things. And that's where, that's most of what is talked about on sports podcasts. ESPN, being a broadcasting network that has a bunch of podcasts within it. But all of them, they really get their bread and butter, not through raw, let me read you the fact sheet. Mm-hmm. That's just going down on the bottom.
Right, yeah.
Right? Of the scores and stuff.
Yeah.
But more so like what's going on in the midst of the lives of the athletes. It's more like reality TV that is in the medium or the category of sports. And we want to talk about that because we want Christians to have a good analysis to what's going on. To not just throw sports out, or even the world of sports that we currently live in, with an NBA, with an NFL, with the Olympics, right? Whatever our current situation is, let's see how it can be redeemed to the glory of God. Absolutely. Let's praise what's praiseworthy. Let's rebuke what needs to be rebuked about it. That another generation might raise up, be able to listen to things, other sports podcasts, or ESPN, and be able to spit out sometimes the bones, sometimes the whole thing. And just be like, that's trash. That's a terrible analysis, and be able to do that. But without training in how to do that, it's very easy, especially because, as we both already testified, the nature of ESPN is just kind of put it on, it's there, and it's just subconsciously you're being enculturated into thinking the way they think, and we want this to be a bulwark against that, a very, very modest one, a podcast a month. But Lord willing, something that is actually beneficial to the listenership, not merely to report sports updates, though we want to do that, but as well as just talking about analysis of sports from drama. And then I would also say just strategy.
Yeah.
Talking strategy. What makes this team win?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like beyond the drama on the team, why are they winning?
Yeah.
Why are they losing? What should this GM do? I mean, these are big head level things that are helpful, whether you're then interested in sports or not, that I think, Lord willing, will be helpful to you who are listening. Because being a GM, a general manager of a sports team, has a lot of transcendent principles that would apply well to just a normal business guy.
Yeah.
Even a guy who just started his own business, to even pastors.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that way.
Yeah.
When you're the head of something, like the church, and again, this is not how you think very often, but like when you're looking at hiring people and stuff like that, like you got to think a little bit like a GM. Like, what would be a helpful hire here with the funds the church has?
What's the best position to put them in? What are their talents and skills fit with?
Yeah. So there's a lot of great stuff.
Well, I think at the end of the day, like we're in an environment right now in our country where discernment training is so necessary.
Yeah.
Because someone has a really nice camera.
Yeah.
Shout out to our camera. But because someone has a really nice camera or good visuals or they sound really good, like it's just automatically accepted as fact and truth. Because this commentator is so articulate that what they're saying must be packed with wisdom.
Yeah.
And we all can use discernment training. Yep. And as much as we can integrate that into areas of our life that we just enjoy, then we'll get better at other spaces. Yep. So what I mean by that is listening to a podcast like ours, you're going to grow in discernment training as you're watching sports, but at the same time, you'll see that you just start to look at other things when you're watching movies.
Yep.
When you're at church, even at your church with your pastor, you should be listening with discernment as well. So hopefully, like that muscle is being trained. So therefore, you just start to look at everything in your life with good discernment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's lighten it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some favorite teams of yours.
Okay.
Mainly trash ones. Some favorite
players.
Just
the greatest organizations in the.
Some favorite players, and again, this first podcast is a little more personal. I gave you the breakdown of what future podcasts will be like.
Yeah.
what teams did you just love growing up? Who was your favorite athlete or two that was a big influence to you?
Yeah, if anybody knows anything about me, Kobe Bryant, favorite athlete of all time, every sport, anywhere. And again, I don't know. I think he might have been Catholic. I'm not exactly. She wasn't super open with his faith out there in the public.
Yeah.
Which I'd actually be curious to have you talk about is how open an athlete should be, and like how binding of their conscience should they be with like mentioning their faith in public. But anyways, Kobe Bryant, favorite player hands down. I think he just is there. I just don't see the level of hard work like I do with him, and I'm sure he sacrificed a lot of things, but it was just unique. Like so what if you don't want to say he's the greatest basketball player of all time, but I don't think anybody was outworking Kobe. Like there just wasn't a single person. He was relentless in everything that he did. He didn't mind the spotlight. He didn't care if everything was on his shoulders. He trusted himself, and he was honest with his teammates. He's like, I'm not going to pass you the ball because I don't think you'll make this. And just being straight up honest with people. We're now like we're in a world where being honest is a sin. Like if you're honest with someone and you hurt their feelings, like feelings matter more than honesty now. Where Kobe wasn't going for that. So favorite athlete, Kobe, Lakers. I grew up in Riverside, so relatively close to LA. So all LA sports, which is just the best teams of all. We got the Dodgers, we got the Lakers, we got the Kings. Just championship statues galore. It's just beautiful. We're sitting pretty right now. We're coming off a World Series with the Dodgers. We had to put little brother back in their place as we moved on down to the championship. And we're only getting stronger, baby. So, man, the world of LA sports it's looking pretty good. I'm not even worried about my Lakers right now.
It's literally on fire right now.
But... All right. In a broad spectrum of the year, But yeah, we're definitely game was actually canceled today, so but it's okay. Hopefully everyone's safe.
Well,
what about you?
You got to give honor where honor's due. LA has a lot of championships, pretty much whatever sport you're looking at, and that's the reality of it. I say that as a preface to the Padres being about the only sports team I really care about. So we will win a championship soon enough.
Okay.
And I know we're going to have to go through LA, and it's going to be great when we win that championship too. It is a little souring when pretty much all of LA's, like the Dodgers themselves, unanimously the Padres were the World Series. Like once we got through them, we were fine.
Right.
And I'm like, you guys just can never just pull it off. Like the Dodgers just have a way of pulling it off. Like it's crazy. But we'll see. I think I'm optimistic this year, and I'm optimistic about 40 years from now because the Dodgers have an economic strategy which says we buy players for 40, 50 years and we just pay them over those 40, 50 years. So we'll see how well that works out over time. But it might end up playing out very nicely because those players are worth that kind of money. And so they make them enough money on the front end, it doesn't matter. But nonetheless, for me, I grew up in upstate New York. I didn't grow up in a big sports household. So I never became a big proponent of a certain team, honestly, just because you kind of inherit that. Growing up in New York, all my friends were largely Yankee fans, and they were, Knicks fans, Syracuse fans. So I would say
great sports town too, but like other than the Yankees, like
Giants,
the Knicks just historically underperformed.
I will say I went to college in Massachusetts. When the Giants beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
Okay, all right.
That was a blast.
No, that was everybody was happy
about being
that
bad guy, dude. I've never rooted for the Giants. I was a Giants diehard fan.
Everybody
for
was.
The Super Bowl. I'm like, all of you New England boys need to sit down right now.
Stand Boston,
because the New England was undefeated, I think, that year. So. Yeah, that's a little bit of my history. I always like certain players.
Yeah, so who are some players like right now? Here in the modern era that
growing up, it was Carmelo Anthony. I mean, he won a championship at Syracuse.
And
then I followed him to Denver, And my first NBA game ever was watching Denver play the back in the day New Jersey Nets. And then he went to the Knicks.
Carmelo on the Nuggets was just filthy.
Yeah.
Unstoppable.
So good. He's almost like a quiet, top guy. Because you look at his numbers and you're like, hey, I think he's like a top 20 scorer all time.
Yeah, no.
But you just don't think of him in that category.
Right, yeah. His fall off was just so hard.
Yeah.
His fall off was just happened quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, the NBA was.
Wait, but you can't say Carmelo's modern. Like, you got to say somebody that's like not retired.
Oh, modern. I mean, as far as just watching an athlete play, it'd be Ja Morant.
Yeah,
Again, we talked about the
Ja
inspiration
Wick.
For this podcast being a little bit of like Ja Morant.
Ja Morant, you inspired this podcast
Yeah.
because of your gun.
Because of your folly and your therapist's folly to how to train you to repent of sin. But
other than that, love the weights you go on the court.
Oh my gosh! Although it is a bummer, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit in future podcasts. But just the nature of the NBA and how it's shifting.
Yeah.
Because even Ja Morant this year said that he's not going to dunk anymore.
Right. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Right.
And I get it from the economic standpoint to a degree.
Yeah.
The injury prone, especially for a guy like Ja, who's like up in the air for like 18 seconds. Usually, like the likelihood of his legs getting taken out is very high, and on his neck or something. But I mean, my wife and I don't. We just have too many young kids to go on a family vacation, but we usually every other year try and go away for like literally a night, maybe 2 nights, and go to an NBA game in different cities. So it's a really fun time. So I've seen a lot of NBA games at this point. I mean, on every couple year basis, but
where have you been, and what's the next one you're looking?
I've been to. I mean, growing up, I went to that New York game.
Yep.
New Jersey game actually. With my wife, we most recently went to San Francisco.
Okay.
So
the new.
A little hack with basketball. Probably true of any sport, but basketball, this is probably most likely to happen where a game gets rescheduled. Okay, so like whatever game is tonight.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If you go and buy the rescheduled tickets, because so many people, they just like kind of build their schedule around it.
Yeah.
And then there's just a huge overflow on the used market.
Huh.
Because they're like, I can't go to that game when it gets rescheduled. Dude, I was like, I mean, we were, I think, in the 8th row.
Uh-huh.
So not courtside. That's like its own, like, 8 to 10 rows. The 8th row, middle.
Yeah.
And the seats, they were like $320 or something. But, like...
Well, yeah, you're in the Warrior. Yeah.
They're like... I looked up other games. I mean, those are like $2,000 to $3,000 seats. They were like a 90% off just because it was a rescheduled game.
Oh.
I think the providence of me looking that up at that time. So... A little hack if you're ever looking for cheap tickets, because I'm like, I've looked up Golden State every year. I mean, we're in San Diego.
Right, yeah.
It's Golden State, and every year I'm like, I'm not spending that kind of money on tickets because I want to sit in decent seats when I go.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I've just never been able to pull it off, dude. Saw that game, I'm like, this is amazing. And so I've been to Phoenix, Portland for a game.
Portland.
Let's see.
Don't tell me you were in Portland like for that only reason to go.
I mean, we went to Portland. A little funny story about Portland. We get to the hotel, and...
Portland's like the last place I want to watch a basketball game.
I don't recommend... I'll never go back to
Portland. Okay, all right.
It is a pretty big NBA city at this point because it's like all they have.
Yeah.
And they don't even have happiness in Portland. So, like, Portland Trailblazers are it. But we walk into the hotel, and this is like a nice hotel downtown, and... We're like, we're from San Diego, and it was raining, which is what we wanted, because we're from San Diego. It never rains here. It's just 72 and sunny every day. Great. But we love rain. And the guy's like, I'm from San Diego. And he immediately his demeanor just drops. And he's like, I really miss it. It's really a wonderful place. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, oh, God.
What did we do?
Does this guy need help? Like, I'm like looking around. He's like, he stopped typing to like check us in. He's not even asking questions. He's like he's in a cycle right now. And I'm like, okay, I'll just take the key. We're going to go to the Trailblazers. It was a really cool national park, or like maybe probably a local park. I don't know if it's national, but
sure.
Like, because it rains, we always hit up like a really beautiful natural wonder.
Cool. That makes sense. Yeah.
And then we go to a game.
Cool. At least you added that on there because I was like, man, it's like
I wouldn't go back to Portland though.
Who did they play at?
Dirty, dude. Actually, in God's kindness, we have had really cool games. So when we went, CJ McCollum broke the record for most points in a quarter.
No way.
He had 29 points in the quarter against the Bulls.
I love
the Bulls had 14. So at the end of the quarter, they changed the entire scoreboard to just McCollum 29, Bulls 14.
Let's go.
He had, I think, 51 points by the end of the second quarter. They didn't play him in the third quarter. Like, all of Rip City was like,
let him get 100. Right, let him get 100.
Like, just who cares about anything else
going
on?
That's the only thing his name is going to be in history for. To be honest, at this point,
didn't play him.
He's not going to be a prominent championship guy.
It was crazy.
Could have let him get 80. He could have got
crazy.
80.
I've seen the Nets play. Gosh, who do they play in their new place, Barclays Center? In New York City.
Some good stadiums there.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen pretty much all the stars.
Which one best stadium you think?
Oh, man. Oracle was just spotless. It's a bold move because everything's white there.
Huh.
It's like it's all very nice. I'm not saying it's like plain white walls.
Right.
But like
clear
white
glass,
is like the backdrop to everything, and you just think like a dirty... It's just hard to keep a place like that clean.
Yeah, and you're also
spotless. I'm thinking like, do they like repaint every other day? Like...
well, that one's not in Oakland. No,
this isn't like
in a nice part.
Nice Bay.
Okay,
yeah. Oh, San Francisco, but I'd say, and I'll do this, and then you do yours to conclude. But one of the coolest professional sports experiences was going to. Long story short, knew a guy who knew the guy whose long time had the season tickets to Yankee Stadium that are row 1, so the row behind home plate. It's like, I don't know, 20 seats, the one that are on TV the whole time. Row 1, seat 1 and 2, and then he also had like 7 and 8, which are the 2 middle ones.
Yeah.
The other 2 are right at the away dugout, like literally next to the away dugout, like this. And at Yankee Stadium, like, this guy's had them for decades. And so I've sat in all 4 of those seats, and they come with an all-you-can-eat 5-star buffet.
Oh, my.
Through the 7th inning, you can get there 2 hours before. I'm talking bacon-wrapped filet mignon. Like, it's amazing. So that was one of the coolest. It was free for me. Like, didn't even pay. I'm like thinking, I don't even know how much this costs. But
yeah.
That was really. I mean, that was back in high school. I went to both those. But yeah, do you have a cool like?
I mean, there's just, as you say, there's just so much glory in just the atmosphere of that.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Being able to enjoy a game like that.
The history. I mean, we were chatting with pretty much every player that came up, like in the box. Yeah, I mean, the guy I was with, I vividly remember. Who was it? A guy in the Cardinals. Who was one of the best players on the Cardinals? Not the catcher. He just retired. Pujols.
Oh, yeah.
So Pujols, he comes up, and the guy is like a diehard Yankees fan that brought me, and he's literally just says to Pujols, like, hey, did not go hit a home run, please. It was like the bottom of the 8th or something, and the Yankees are winning by 1 or something. There's like 2 guys on base, and Pujols just looks over at him, and I don't remember exactly, but basically says, like, laughs and says, like, I got you. Gets up there, jacks a home run, dude. So then on the way back, just like comes over. I think I don't remember exactly. I think he even shook his hand and was like, "That was for you." It was just, but like that's just a different experience.
Right? Yeah.
Like, I'm just seriously. Like, I'm eating my bacon wrapped filet mignon. Like I don't even care about. I don't even really like baseball at that point. So I'm just like, what is going on right now?
Right. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'd say my 2 best experiences are actually more recent. Well, I've had some good ones. Yeah. And also some really bad ones. I'm also, I forgot, I'm a Colts fan. Whole other story that we'll have to talk. It's so random, but it's, anyways.
You got LA teams to choose from now.
Yeah, I know. Now I do. But back at that time I did it. Yeah. Anyways, Peyton Manning was quick story. Peyton Manning was favorite athlete. My first game ever seeing him play was against the Chargers, and he threw like 5 picks. And lost the game. So that was my first NFL experience. Anyways, 2 places. One, Intuit Dome, where the Clippers play in Inglewood now. Amazing. It is everything that they say it is.
Really?
It is. It's a little bit creepy that like they know they memorize your face ID and all that stuff, but like
what does that even mean?
So they have an app. So you register on the app and you add like a card there. You link up a card, like you scan your ID and all that stuff. So they already know you're 21, and you can keep your phone in your pocket the whole game. The whole game. You even walking in, you don't have to pull out your tickets.
No.
They see your face, green check mark. You're good.
It's
you walk
the
in.
666 app at the App Store.
That's what I'm saying. It is a little creepy.
Yeah.
Same thing. Like you feel like you're stealing, but really, honestly, they're stealing all the money out of your pocket because it's like, I walked in. I got my dad a hat. I walked in. Check mark. Like they have these little things that like lift up and let you in. I grabbed a hat and I walked right out.
Wow.
Got the charge on my card later. You can do that same thing. Jersey, shoes, food, concessions, all that other stuff. You don't have to do anything. But other than that, like the layout is just beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, they did a great job.
Was that the playoff game you went to?
No, the Intuit Dome just opened up this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just this year. Yeah, yeah. So it's brand spanking new. But good stuff there.
Yeah.
The playoff game that I went to, like that was an epic experience. LeBron James, game winner on Dylan Brooks, who's like, talk about a Draymond Green-esque villain. Like, you're trash, you're not that good.
Yeah.
That was obviously the best. Crowd was going crazy.
Yeah.
We kind of got some seats that are nearby one of the players' families. So like it was nuts.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
Padres Dodgers playoff game I went to was one of the first after COVID. Like the first playoff game after COVID.
Oh yeah. San Diego.
Oh my God! Between playoffs and just COVID being done.
Yeah.
And Dodgers Padres, and they did win. I mean, that was certainly one of the best games.
Yeah.
And then of course I gave my wife. My wife gets into it at NBA games.
Yeah.
Any other sport does not care at all. And like we don't even have an NBA team.
Right.
She just like loves it.
Yeah. So what is that? We'll wrap this up. But what does that say about like being like going into a sports environment like that?
Yeah.
Where like it just gets you going.
Yeah.
Like in a playoff environment, like what is that teaching us about God?
Yeah, great question. It shows that it has a revelation of God's loving nature. And by loving nature, I mean God is 3 in 1, Father, Son, and Spirit. He loves and always has. He is love, and that necessitates that he has, by his own definition of love. Love is kind and patient, doesn't envy or boast. That's this outward thing. And therefore, the Father, Son, and Spirit have always been in a perfectly loving union, right? Mm-hmm. Just to use a parallel to that, or actually an antithesis to that, Allah is supposedly a loving God who is eternal, but he is one person, and therefore needs a creation to love, essentially, to maintain that status of loving. Otherwise, there is no witness of love whatsoever.
Right, yeah.
Whereas the Father, Son, and Spirit perfectly witness to one another as love, that they are each loving and love in and of itself. And so I say that because we are communal people. We are people who want to be with other people. And if you think about it, if you're like, no, Zach, like I love my alone time, that's usually just due to sin. And I don't necessarily even mean just your sin. It might be that. But the sins of others.
Yeah, right.
Every time I go to a Padres game, I walk downtown. I park like 10-minute walk from the ballpark because it's free. And I like walking through downtown. San Diego's pretty nice. Depends on what they're doing with the homeless at any given moment. If they're dealing with it, it's great.
Right, yeah, true.
But my point is, every time I walk there, I think, it's just tons of people all in the same, they're all in the same aim. Mm-hmm. And I think, man, imagine the day when all these people bow the knee to Christ. Downtowns are going to be the best places.
Yeah.
Because you feel the energy just as you're walking down there, right? As you get closer to the ballpark, every bar is full, every restaurant's full, everyone's about it, everyone's excited, the stir is there. Like you're like, what? Like this is something's going on here,
right?
And it's just a baseball game. It's fun, but my point is, we are designed to be in that type of community, a community that has a mission, an aim, that is enjoying one another, that's fellowship, breaking bread with one another, that is putting aside other potential differences, like how bad LA sports are, to enjoy one another, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people love going to games and why they love sports. They want to be a part of a team, because we're all designed to be a part of God's people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's a misplaced. In a very temporary, very fleeting place. I mean, in an obvious way. How many players do you put your hope in, and they're bad, or they get traded, or they break their leg, or a team moves. And we'll unpack a lot of more of this stuff because it is the reality, and these are idols in the land that we want to put down while redeeming the glory of what we believe is a gift in sports.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. Yeah, all creation, we're just groaning to be on the same page and in the same mind and aligning ourselves with the same sports team. It scratches that itch a little bit, but obviously it's not fully satisfied unless united with Christ. So that's a good way of putting it.
Cool. We'll end there. We thank you for joining us on this episode 1, and more to come.